This is rare for us to start only 10 minutes after the allotted time. So thank you all for coming on time. And if you see people wander in for the next 20 or 30 minutes, that's the way we roll normally. So, okay, should I stand? You want speakers to stand up? Or can you see everybody like this? Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. And I want to thank our host, Masjid in particular, for inviting us here. Things have been very difficult since October 7th with a lot of venues. And we really, really appreciate that, notwithstanding everybody's very, very strong views on those topics, that we in America can still bring Jews, Muslims, and allies to get together and hopefully form a community and teach other people based on the insights that we gather from our community. You're not allowed to applaud me. I'm here as a Levite. If you don't know what that means, look it up. I am not a Kohen. So yeah, this organization has been around almost 17 years. JIDS has been to try to bring people together, educate folks, and learn to love your cousins. That's the term that we use for one another here. Our next two programs, we don't have the venues set yet, but one will give you an opportunity to meet somebody from the Pew Research Center and hear about facts and figures on faith in America today. In February, we will take on the topic of Israel and Palestine again, and specifically why extremists seem to punch above their weight, why they seem to have so much power, and moderate voices seem to be so, relatively speaking, impotent. So you won't want to miss those. But today we are here to learn about our most sacred holidays. And the idea was that these are holidays that people tend not to be, for lack of a better term, exposed to by the other. I've read the Quran multiple times. I've got different hadiths, books of hadiths. I've read Muslim philosophy. I've been to any number of iftars. Not one Eid celebration other than interfaith things, not during the Eids, not one. And I'm sure that there are Muslim analogs who could say the same thing about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So we will be led today by two speakers. I'm going to introduce first our second speaker, Imam Refai Arefin. Now, he is the Imam at this center, the Islamic Community Center of Potomac. He previously served as the Imam of the Islamic Association of Greater Hartford, in addition to performing duties as Deputy Chaplain of the Connecticut State Legislature. His Islamic studies include Sharia and Arabic scholarship at Al-Azhar University in Cairo, Al-Balkh University in Amman, and has done mentorship under scholars in Fez and Damascus. He holds a BA in International Relations from Brown University and a JD from Quinnipiac University School of Law in 2013, and actually founded his own law firm, which provided legal advocacy in state and federal courts throughout Connecticut. So this is like a guy who hits for average and home runs. He's an Imam lawyer. Not sure I have either. The other numbskull is my firstborn child, also known as Rabbi Hannah Spiro. She's the rabbi of Hill Havarah, an independent congregation in Capitol Hill. Rabbi Hannah is a 2017 graduate of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. She serves on the board of directors of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical Association and is involved with TRUA, the Rabbinic Call for Human Rights. Rabbi Hannah served for multiple years on the steering committee of the Imam Rabbi Summit for the DC area, and we need to get back to those summits. We need to start doing those Imam Rabbi Summits again. Additionally, she is accomplished in singing, songwriting, and guided meditation. She's done 5 CDs, and for years her music could be heard frequently on Jewish rock radio. Unfortunately, she has not developed an aptitude for understanding football, and even after her father turned 65, she refuses to watch games with him. So if you have, I have issues with her, maybe you will too. My parents live in Canada. All right. All right.
I have to. It is such an honor to be here with you all, and I am really, really, really excited to get to learn from you, Imam, especially. But I'm also excited to hear when we all speak, not just from folks about the Eids, which I have so much to learn about, but I'm also guessing that I'm going to say a lot about the Jewish high holidays that folks in the room are going to be able to add to and also complicate. And I look forward to that as well. So thank you in advance. And I am just going to share some of my own thoughts, but like they say, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. There are so many more things to say about the high holidays that than I'm going to offer. So I want to name that disclaimer in advance. But I'm really, really, really grateful to be here at the Islamic Community Center of Potomac, and excited to learn from you all. So the high holidays, as they're often called in English, are typically referred to in Hebrew, I would say, as the Yamim Noraim, literally the days of awe, or sometimes just as the Chagim, which literally means the holidays. But like, what holidays? If you're talking about the Chagim, it's probably the high holidays, the Yamim Noraim, the days of awe. And I want to offer that even though Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, are in many ways distinct and very different, I want to look at them and the time around them as a unit of sorts. There's a really important flow there. So let's begin in the summer. In the month of Elul, the final month of the Hebrew calendar. Elul, if you are into journaling, if you are into meditation, if you are into like processing endlessly with your friends and loved ones, this is a time for you. I mean, it's really a time for everyone in theory, but like Elul is supposed to be a time where we are digging deep, we're reviewing our year, we're thinking about the meaning of our lives, and we're thinking about the state of our relationships and like the ethical state of ourselves. Because when the new year begins with Rosh Hashanah, the days of awe, the Yamim Noraim begin, and we are meant to be engaging in teshuvah. Teshuvah is typically translated as repentance. It literally means return, and we'll talk about that later. But basically, what I want to say for now is that Elul, the last month of the summer, brings us into Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, the Jewish New Year. Between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, we call them the 10 days of Teshuvah. That whole time is meant to be spent gearing up for a really spiritually intense time of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And I would offer, like, if you observe that day, it's potentially going to be intense, but it is that much more meaningful and that much more intense with the backdrop of having sat in reflection during the month of Elul and taken the Jewish New Year seriously and celebrated on it and spent the 10 days of Teshuvah continuing that reflection and engaging in like reparative conversation and reflection around relationships. And then Yom Kippur comes, and it is the spiritual height of the year. And then pretty soon after, we have Sukkot, which is like a fall harvest party where we get to sort of like let loose and hang out outdoors and realize that everything, like in a sense, everything is very weighty and meaningful. And in a sense, everything is meaningless. So it's like a bit of a spiritual cleanse. So I want to go back and talk a little bit more in detail about those themes. But I wanted to start off by saying there's a flow there. Elul, Rosh Hashanah, the 10 days of Tshuva, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. Okay. So I would say the central theme of the Yamim Noraim, the high holidays, the days of awe, is Teshuvah. It's often translated as repentance, like I said, but it literally means return. The idea is that we are supposed to be returning to our best selves. We are intrinsically good, but we also miss the mark and we lose sight of our best selves. And so every year we have to work really hard to come back there. So one massive piece of this is doing repair within our relationships. So Jewish wisdom is really clear that the harm we do to other people, we cannot fix it by reflecting on it and meditating on it and then going to services and praying about it. We have to repair that harm with the people that we harmed. And so I think the high holidays are in part meant to be a reminder, like, okay, if you've been sitting on this challenging situation with a loved one or with an acquaintance or whatever, like, all right, like work on repairing that. Like, this is a good time to think about that. But then also, there are some relationships that no matter how hard we try or no matter how much we would like, it's really actually hard or sometimes impossible to do that repair. Or some of our issues are really with ourselves. And for that, we are able to imagine that we can go to synagogue and spend the day with community in prayer and in reflection, as we have been hopefully during the month of Elul in the first half of Tishrei, the first month of the Jewish year, and that we can come out of that day with like a sense of actual renewal and refreshment. So it's said that from person to person, we have to atone to one another. But when it comes to our relationship with God, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, like that will atone for us. But we can't just show up to services and expect that to fix everything. Okay, another massive theme of this time is that of human fragility. So you'll sometimes hear of Yom Kippur referred to as a rehearsal for death. We're supposed to fast from food, from water, from bathing, from sex, from anointment, or like lots of forms of personal grooming, from wearing leather. And we're supposed to wear white. Traditionally, a lot of people will wear these white garments that they will later one day be buried in. And when I was a kid, I think I had this idea that fasting was meant to punish you for the things you've done wrong, and that's why you're going to synagogue to repent for them. But
You didn't get that from me.
I did not get that from you. I did not. I got that from the Hebrew school you sent me to. Just kidding. I know. I mean, I think it's just like it's a natural assumption, I think. If you're talking about atonement and saying sorry, well, there are natural consequences for the things we do, and then there are also unnatural. Maybe this was I don't know. But I once I got to be of the age where I was doing that fasting myself, I realized I think it's actually very it's meant to be clarifying, and it's many Jews' favorite day of the year. It's many Jews' favorite holiday. I do not think that would be the case if it was meant to be about punishment. I think that I imagine many people in the room, mostly the Muslims, are way more acquainted with fasting than I am, doing it for a full month, and not just here and there. But in my experience, um, the the clarity offered by focusing not on the physical, but on the spiritual, and also the vulnerability unlocked by not being totally physically on my game, can help me get to a more emotional and less like logical, rational place, which I think is helpful for the kind of work that we're trying to doing during the Yamim Noraim. Um, I think it also elicits compassion. It elicits humility. Um, when I am on the bima, when I'm leading services for Yom Kippur, I think I'm less worried about what I look like and how smart I sound, and I'm more just like feeling emotional and trying to be there with all the other people who are feeling that too. Um, how much time do I have? Or how much negative time do I have? Okay. Um, there is additionally an important theme of the high holidays of that I think goes alongside of human fragility, and that's of the sovereignty of the divine. So we are powerless, but God or nature, um, or however we want to conceive of it. And as those of you who have been involved with JIDS, or those of you who are Jews, know there are so many different ways that Jews think about the divine, but the idea that that's what's really in control, that's what really has power. And us as humans, to a certain degree, we can really, really, really try to do our best, and we can try to repair the harm we've done. And to a certain degree, we are tiny and God is eternal. Um, and so um, we have a piece of liturgy called Unatana Tokef that reflects on basically the fact that like a lot of us are going to die this year and we have no idea how. And then we list a long list of ways that people could die. And it is pretty intense, but it goes along with this idea that like our life is impermanent, and it really is on us to work really hard to make it as beautiful and as aligned with who we really want to be as we can. Hence, coming back to Teshuvah, coming back to our best selves. There's a story that I love about an ancient story about Yom Kippur and Tu B'Av, which is like in the middle of the summer, which is like it was like a day of like love and mating, being like the two most joyful days on the Jewish calendar back in the day. The idea being that everyone would wear white, and the young woman would like lend one another dresses. And so everyone was like dressed the same, and it was like a clean slate. And people would be able to connect as a community and even like seek romantic partners in a way that like wasn't focused on background, wasn't focused on money, wasn't focused on physical beauty or style, and it was really focused on like what's on the inside. And I think that, I don't know, I think that in our look, like the high holidays today in the Jewish world can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But I think one thing it can mean is like coming together with a bunch of people to be vulnerable and be real and be thinking about that which is most meaningful together. So if there's still time, I can name a few elements of high holiday practices and readings that I think might have some connections to Islam from what I understand, but my knowledge of Islam is not as high as I would like it to be. So same with Judaism for that matter. But so like you all can school me. But there is a shared text. I have no idea if it's read on the Eids or not, but I know it's a sacred text in Islam. In Judaism, we call it the Akedah, and it is Abraham's binding of Isaac. I believe in the Quran, it's Ibrahim's binding of Ishmael.
It's not mentioned by name. Yeah,
Whoa.
it's not mentioned. It's not.
Wild. Okay. Interesting.
But Muslims believe it's this one.
Okay. Yeah. And you know, it's read on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Why is the binding of Isaac, the story that we read on the second day of Rosh Hashanah? I think growing up, actually, this is really funny. No, I was about to say, growing up in the Hebrew schools that you sent me to, this is what we learn. I mean, we learn traditionally that it's about faith, right? And so if one of the themes of the high holidays is human fragility and divine power, then yeah, it would make a lot of sense to read a text about God taking control and telling you how it's going to be, and Abraham, being willing to go with that. But at the Hebrew school that I send my children to, the Hebrew school associated with my own congregation, last year, my older child was in first grade, and they were learning about the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, because they were doing Torah stories in Hebrew school. And apparently he was so mad he wasn't just so mad about the story. He was so mad about everyone acting like it was okay that he started throwing furniture. And the director of the Hebrew school said, maybe we re-examine how we teach this text, or if we teach it at all in first grade. And I was like, I think that might actually be valid, because for me now, I think I see the binding of Isaac as a really challenging text. And I think that it has to be an invitation to engage with faith, as well as an invitation to engage with like struggle and self-examination, and thinking and rethinking about how we're engaging with the divine and how we're making decisions. And so, yeah, I think it's an opportunity to think about divine sovereignty and also to complicate that idea and think about what role we have in it. Are there other things you wanted me to make sure to talk about?
I think we're kind of
Out of town?
time.
Okay.
I would just say one is that we're in the space that we're in, and this is sort of a combined Jewish and Muslim thought. You all were asked to remove your shoes when you came into this space. This is a prayer area. I don't know if those of you who are Muslim realize that Jews prostrate themselves as well, but only during the high holidays, not otherwise. So Jewish people here are wondering why you're doing that. People are putting their heads on the ground. But Muslims should understand that Jews also go through this experience, but we don't do this every day. We do this, just on this one time a year. So, okay.
For the Grand Aleinu. Yeah. Imam.
After both speakers.
All right. Thank you so much, Hannah. Salam, shalom, peace. Welcome, everyone, on this beautiful winter day. Kind of tanning out here, so you'll have to forgive me if I'm if I'm squinting a little bit. But I hope that you all are having a wonderful visit to ICCP if it's your first time. And I think for many of you, how many of you, actually, if you don't mind me asking, how many of you are visiting a mosque for the first time? Okay, so it's not many because, of course, your group has been to many Islamic centers. So I hope that you'll find our communities very welcoming, and hopefully we do our best to represent our faith positively. So I've been tasked to talk about Eid. The Arabic word for holiday is Eid, which comes from the word al-Adha, which means to return. So it's very interesting how our holidays are kind of linked in that way. And hopefully I'll try to weave that story together in terms of what is it that we're returning to. And the question that I want to pose is why Eid? Why return back? Because you think of holidays and you think of moving forward. And when you think of returning, you think of going back to something that's already familiar. And that's reminiscent of our journey as human beings. Many times we think that we're physical beings that also have a spiritual reality. But as Muslims, we believe the opposite. We believe that we are fundamentally spiritual beings that also have a physical reality. That the human being wasn't noble based on the physical form, but rather because God instilled the human being with a soul. And so that is what elevated the human being. And for that reason, God ordered the angels to prostrate. And for that reason, Satan, who couldn't understand how the human being instilled with that Adamic nature, consisting of that which is terrestrial and that which is also heavenly, that which is terrestrial and that which is celestial, that the human being had a higher ability, that we could transcend that temptation and that we could be a better version of ourselves. So that's what the journey is really about, and that's what the holidays are about. Many of you are familiar with the month of Ramadan. It's a month in which we try to center ourselves around piety, around God consciousness, self-control, mastery over the ego, of course, empathy with the poor, especially when we have young kids. That's usually where we start. So that way they can understand, for them to experience something that perhaps they haven't experienced before. And then there's the verse in the Quran in the second chapter, and I'll recite it for you. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. O you who believe, fasting has been prescribed on you as it has been prescribed on those nations before you, which we believe is a clear reference to Yom Kippur and the fasting of Mary and others, from the nations that preceded the message of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in order that you would attain to piety. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. So you would gain a higher level of mindfulness and consciousness of your Creator. That's one part. That's the month of Ramadan. The other Eid, and Hannah kind of got us started on thinking about this, is connected to the story of Abraham. And that is a story that's fundamentally about his readiness to sacrifice. Of course, the most precious thing to him, if a life can be considered a thing, in adherence, in obedience to God's command. So it was really a test of sincerity. So wait a minute. That doesn't sound like a celebration. Fasting, that sounds kind of like a punishment. Could be a punishment, depending apparently on which Hebrew school you go to. I didn't know I was in a family therapy session here, So this could get interesting later. But alhamdulillah, as we say, all praise is due to God. I feel like I have an unfair advantage here.
You know why grandparents and grandchildren get along so well? Common enemy.
I'm going to save that one. That's a good one. So
Isaac and Ishmael.
going back to my question, what is it that we're celebrating? Because fasting seems kind of serious, and a prophet being willing to sacrifice, it also sounds very serious. It doesn't sound, and then high holidays, that definitely sounds really serious. I mean, Yom Kippur itself, the meaning is it's something weighty, right? And it goes back to that word of Eid, of returning. we go back to this year after year, but it also means that we return back to our loved ones. We reconnect with that which we've been disconnected with. We catch up with our loved ones. We come back to God. We come home in a sense because, we consider the Quran as dhikr, as remembrance. And God always talks about remembrance throughout the pages of the Quran, and I think it's also found in the Hebrew Bible. It's found in other faiths as well, the idea of remembering God. But how can you talk about remembrance to someone who doesn't even believe in God? If you're talking to an atheist, a Muslim would have an easy time answering that question because we believe that we are hardwired, that we have part of our Adamic nature is that we incline towards the truth. That doesn't mean that humans are not capable of great evil. We know for a fact that we are. But that the essence of the human being is pure and beautiful and seeks God. And so as one of the scholars said, لَيْسَ الْعِيدُ لِمَنْ لَبِسَ الْجَدِيدُ. The Eid celebration is not for the one that wears new clothing. إِنَّمَا الْعِيدُ لِمَنْ طَاعَتُهُ يَزِيدُ. But rather, the Eid celebration is for someone whose obedience increases. So that means that you today should be the best. And my son's somewhere here, I think downstairs probably. I always lecture my kids. They always complain. Even my nieces and nephews, they're like, you're always lecturing. Like, when will you stop? But one of the things, but it's good because I get to do my practice throughout the week. And then on Friday, you guys get to hear the best work that my kids have already filtered, right, and told me what doesn't work. One of the things I always tell them, I said, as long as today's you is the best you that has ever been, life is all about just being a little bit better. And if we just kind of filter and distill our messages to that, I think things would be different. So what he's saying is that the reason that you have something to celebrate is because you may not have captured everything in the message. There might be so much more knowledge and wisdom for you to learn, but you're on the path. You're working on it. And so you're improving. And so that itself merits celebration. لَيْسَ الْعِيدُ لِمَنْ تَجَمَّلَ بِاللِّبَاسِ وَالرُّكُوبِ. That an Eid celebration is not for the one that embellishes or adorns themselves with nice rides. People haven't changed, right? Before you had a nice shiny horse, now you have a nice shiny car. Same kind of thing. Or with nice, beautiful garments. إِنَّمَا الْعِيدُ لِمَنْ غُفِرَتْ لَهُ الذُّنُوبِ. But rather, the Eid celebration is for the one whose sins have been forgiven. And so it's really an essence of coming back to God and taking stock of it. Because too often we approach religion from the perspective of guilt or shame. That, I always meet Muslims, they're like, well, I'm not practicing. And then they're like, but I have a question. I'm like, well, why did you feel like you needed to start the question that way? I know that you don't see me very often, but. So we often minimize ourselves, and we tell ourselves that, well, I'm not good enough. And it's important for us to, get off of that pedestal and to realize that and I mentioned this actually in the Friday sermon that I last gave, that there's a saying in Morocco that you don't know who you meet could be a saint of God. And in Turkey, they have a saying that, the Prophet Khizr, could be among us. Because when you meet a person, do you really know? Like, that person might seem insignificant to you, but that person could be so precious to the Lord of the universe. And so you don't really know their reality. So Eid is about consistency. It's about coming back. It's about taking a moment to celebrate what you have, not what you're missing. And to say, hey, wait a minute. In the month of Ramadan, we said this is a special day. In the season of the Abrahamic Eid, we have a day before which is called the day of Arafah, in which millions gather in order to ask God, which is similar to Yom Kippur, in which people ask for forgiveness. And they spend that, especially as the sun is setting, which is also quite similar, we ask for forgiveness, especially those on the pilgrimage. Also wearing those white simple garments, that kafan, the shroud that you wear, at the time that you're buried. but wait a minute. We have these seasons of worship and then we have this celebration. Maybe the celebration is to remember we don't really have to wait for a particular day or a particular hour. Like, do I only worship God one day in the year? Like, where's God? What's he doing? Is he like out gone fishing the rest of the year? Like, if I take a step to God, he's going to take a step back. If I go to him walking, he's going to come back running. So the reality is if you feel distant from God, ask yourself who moved? Did God turn away from you or did you turn away from God? And so that's what the celebration is about, is wait a minute, I can do this all year round. He's always there answering my call. And you feel refreshed because you spent the month of Ramadan staying away, abstaining from food, drink, from relations. And all of you who fasted know that water has a taste. You know, when you have that first sip, it just tastes so amazing and so refreshing. And you're like, God is so generous. And you feel this gratitude that just emanates from your heart. It's not just something that you say, it's something that you experience and you feel. And you come to God with that full presence and you feel centered. And so that's why the Eid celebration is about coming back, a reminder to be conscious of God. You know, Abraham, he saw in a vision that he would sacrifice his son. You know, in the Quran, the name is not mentioned, but because of the chronology, we do believe that it's Ishmael. But if it's Ismail, if it's Isaac, it doesn't change anything, right? Because the lessons are just as powerful and it's the same. But what I always like to focus on is what his son responds. The dad doesn't, you know, just try to fulfill it, take the shortcut, easy way, not tell him what's really going down. He tells his son that I saw this vision and I have to do this. And it says in the Quran that he responded, Ya abati, oh my dear father, do as you have been commanded, as God commands you. So that begs the question, didn't he love his son? He did, but he loved God more. That attachment was secondary to something greater. That his love for his son was a part of his love for God. And in the end, it wasn't his son that was slaughtered. It was his attachment. And that's what the Ramadan celebration is about. And that's what the Abrahamic celebration is about. To remove attachment to anything other than your love for the Almighty. And it's a lesson for the ages. That when you get rid of all of these attachments, then what you love comes back to you. His son wasn't taken away from him, but rather his son came back to him in an even purer form, in an even better form than it was before. So God, when he deprives you, he's actually sweetening you. Sometimes giving comes in the form of deprivation. And I'll conclude with this saying from the Ibn Ata'illah. He said, رُبَّمَا أَعْطَاكَ فَمَنَعَكَ وَرُبَّمَا مَنَعَكَ فَأَعْطَاكَ وَمَتَى فَتَحَ لَكَ بَابَ الْفَهْمِ فِي الْمَنْعِ صَارَ الْمَنْعُ عَيْنَ الْعَطَاءِ. He says, sometimes he gives while depriving you. And sometimes he deprives you in giving. When he opens up your understanding of deprivation, then deprivation becomes the means of his giving. So, you know, if we really understood the wisdom of God, we would understand that sometimes things are taken away, but that's God's way of actually giving us something that's far more important for us to receive from him. So I know that, you know, celebrations with kids and with families are often about, you know, exchanging gifts. We do that on both of the Eid. It's about being together. It's about breaking bread and sharing food together. But I also think that it's about celebrating where you are and who you are. That out of all of humanity, God has granted us the greatest gift, which is the gift of guidance and the gift of clarity. And I think that more than anything, that moral clarity is the greatest gift that a person can receive. So it is worthy of celebration. Alhamdulillah. Glory be to God.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, let me describe a little bit of what's going to happen for the rest of the program. We're going to have Q&A now. At JIDS, that doesn't mean it has to be a question. You can make a statement, but just keep it short. And then we're going to break into small groups, and among other things, you can talk about the binding of Isaac or Ishmael. That's one of the possibilities. And then I think we're going to come back in plenary session shortly, for a brief session after the small groups. But it starts with you guys. Go ahead, Shemai.
Short comment about what you said about a comment and a question. What you said about sometimes people who you don't know are saints or could be saints. That same idea is in Judaism in the tradition of the Lamed Vavnikim, the 36 hidden righteous people in the world that no one knows who they are because they're so humble and they don't toot their horn and nobody knows, but the world exists because of those 36 people. So a parallel idea in Jewish tradition. I wanted to hear more. Thank you for that fascinating explanation about the Eid and the moral clarity. I wanted to hear more about the particulars. What is the difference between the two Eids?
Sure.
Is there a focus more on something in one Eid and a focus on another thing on the other Eid? If you could more elaborate about that.
Sure. So from the perspective of the regular practitioner celebrating, in America, I would say that there's so much emphasis on Eid al-Fitr that comes at the end of Ramadan. But traditionally, that is the smaller Eid. The bigger Eid is the one connected to Abraham, which is Eid al-Adha, which is the Eid of sacrifice. And the reason for that is because, the celebration of Ramadan is connected pretty much just to the month of Ramadan. Whereas the message and the lesson of the one of sacrifice is broader. I mean, it's also broader in the sense that it's also very universal. Ramadan is something that we believe that God gave only the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. But we don't believe that, that the message of God is limited to the Prophet Muhammad. We believe that, of course, there were 25 prophets that are mentioned, and actually there are thousands of them that preceded him, right? Actually, the vast majority of those that are mentioned in the Quran are from what we would say Bani Israel, from the children of Isaac, right? And they're mentioned, actually Moses is the most mentioned figure in the Quran, more than the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It's pretty hard to go a few pages in the Quran without Moses being mentioned. So that message is so universal about sacrifice, and you'll see, that Abraham is a central figure. The Kaaba itself in Mecca, we believe, was built by Abraham, right? And so on that holiday, people will traditionally, they will sacrifice an animal as a way of expressing their sacrifice to God, their willingness to sacrifice all of that which is precious to them. And then the Eid al-Fitr is about celebrating the fast. As the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, he said, "Lis-sa'imi farhatan." The fasting person experiences two joys. One is at the time of breaking their fast, and the second one is at the time of meeting their Lord. And so what we'll traditionally do, we'll exchange gifts, we'll spend time as a family, but it's not focused on the worship. So it's a bit different. The high holidays, those holidays themselves are the worship. But for us, we have a season of worship, and then the holiday comes at the end of that season of worship to celebrate that you were successful in completing that season of worship.
Is there a fixed date for Eid al-Adha?
Yes. So Eid al-Adha is on the 10th day of the month of the Hijjah. We're following the lunar calendar at the end of the lunar year. And of course, because it's 300, instead of 365, it's 354 days. So it advances 11 days earlier every year.
Hi, thank you. I think this would be for both of you. To the extent that the belief in both religions is that God, the Almighty, is basically in control of everything. What is the belief as to how much people's actions influence that? And then following up on that, follow-up question to that is, if God is in control of everything, then doesn't God actually control what you're even doing? So that maybe there is no free will, and ultimately it doesn't really matter what you're doing.
Okay. How many hours do you guys have? You know, I have a class on this, right? On the Islamic, we call Aqidah, which is the same word, word in Hebrew, right? Which means to bind, right? So the word in Arabic is our belief system. Do you mind if I'll jump in since I already started.
Yeah.
So, agency is very important for Muslims. And this is, when it comes to Muslim theology and Jewish theology is almost the same, especially when it comes to our concept of God. There is one departure, which is when it comes to the concept of salvation and an afterlife. So Muslims believe that this world is a temporal world. So it's a very short relative to eternity. And that the reason that God created us is so that He would be loved and He would be worshiped, not out of obligation, but out of choice, right? And so love is a very core and essential part of our faith and our religion. And that love is connected to our agency. So God created us with that natural inclination, but also that susceptibility to make mistakes. As the Prophet Muhammad said, he said, all of the children of Adam make mistakes, right? We're all fallible. But the best of those who make mistakes are those who return back. So that recognition, the making of a mistake and then building and moving forward is a core part of that. And so what ends up happening is that at the end of a person's life, and at the end of creation, then there's a day of judgment. And then on the day of judgment, God weighs their actions in a way that we never could, right? We're not very good at judging. We usually get it wrong, right? But God knows under every person and their intentions. And those whose actions confirm their faith enter paradise. And so that's very important for us, because if we did not have full agency, then it would not be fair for God to hold us accountable. And now I'll get to your core
How does
question.
that full agent, that seems
Yeah.
a contradiction.
It's not.
To have
Yeah.
full agency, but yet God controls everything.
It is because we have no control or power. God says in the Quran, "Wallahu khalaqakum wa ma ta'malun," that God has created you and has created your actions. So like, I decide that I want to snap my finger, but I didn't create that snap. My ability is contingent on God allowing that to happen. But the choice was mine. But the actual event and occurrence comes from God. And so therefore, God does not hold us accountable for outcomes. He holds us accountable only for our choices. And that's why we believe that everything has been written. We believe in both predestiny, and we also believe in free will and choice, both simultaneously.
I think in Torah, not just the Torah with a big T, but like Torah, like Jewish wisdom, the small t, like there are, first of all, there are some beautifully put attempts at reconciling the contradictions that you've named. And I think you just did a really beautiful job of, like, I feel like this is very Maimonidean, what you just said. Yeah.
He's from North Africa, as you know.
Yeah.
Moses Maimonides, he was the official physician of Salahuddin, of Saladin. And he lived in Egypt. You can go to this. I've been to the synagogue in Cairo where he wrote his masterpiece. Yeah.
But I also think that I don't know, for me, Sukkot coming right after Yom Kippur is a really important part of that trajectory. And the primary sacred text of Sukkot is Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, which starts off with everything is breath, everything is vapor, everything is meaningless. And no matter how much you try to learn, no matter how good of a job you try to do, and no matter how much money you earn, you're still going to die. And I think that kind of, I just think that the weightiness of I have all of these decisions in my hands of Yom Kippur, and the no, but I said God's in control, and like really I am going to be dust again pretty soon from the perspective of eternity. I think those do go hand in hand. I think those are like that push and pull of those two perspectives, the contradiction that you named. I think that that a balance between those two mindsets feels very Jewish to me and feels very psychologically healthy. I feel like if you have too much of one and not enough of the other, at least the Jewish calendar will pull you back the other way pretty soon, I think. You know, we have Purim and then we have Pesach, like a similar kind of dynamic. So yeah, I don't know if that's helpful, but
Okay.
Hi, maybe I'm going in a direction that could be embedded in all sorts of presentations, but I think it's of concern to me. In the two traditions, the role of women and how it's evolved and what their roles would be if there's specificity in each of great days in our respective traditions. Days, it's a month. And how their wisdom is channeled into these practices and these thoughts and how it enhances the traditions.
I can go first. Well, I would say traditionally, back in the day, women would probably be supposed to be prepping Rosh Hashanah dinner, and I am leading services Erev Rosh Hashanah, so I am not doing that. So I don't know. The Jewish community, the egalitarian Jewish world, it looks pretty different from how things did a while back. And also, what has not changed in most Jewish communities is the liturgy, like the traditional liturgy. Like one of the central prayers in our tradition for the high holidays is Avinu Malkeinu. So you know it, sing it with me. Avinu Malkeinu, Chanenu Vanenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chanenu Vanenu, Ki ein banu masim. Our Father, our King, be good to us because we don't have any particular merit on our own. And so different Jewish communities engage with that differently. And at different stages of my life, I've engaged with that differently. So for me now, on the one hand, I sort of in the prayer book that we use in our community, we translate Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, as our parent, our sovereign. Is it sovereign or ruler? I forget. It's one of those things. It's not king. And it's really important to me that like the kids in my community grow up with like a gender expansive / a gender idea of God, either one of those things, I don't know, not a specified gendered version of God. And then also we follow Avinu Malkeinu with a blessing around Shekhinah, the like sacred feminine popularized in like medieval Kabbalistic thought. But the thing is, like, I don't know, like there are some Jewish communities, I think locally Beit Mishpacha, which is the like LGBTQ Jewish community that meets at the DCJCC. I think they stopped, correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone's more familiar with Beit Mish than I am, like, I think they stopped chanting Avinu Malkeinu and they chant Imenu. I don't know, they do. I think they changed the Hebrew liturgy to be I don't think gender neutral. I think they feminized it. And so that's a thing that's happening too. And I don't know, for me, like I like to think of what I think of God as gender expansive, and not as patriarchal. And also, there are ways in which of thinking of God in gendered ways in like certain moments can, I think, be really theologically interesting and like emotionally provocative in different ways. So I don't know. Yeah.
So, sure. Quickly, of course, because it's an easy question. You know, I think the problem is that, you know, we kind of make ourselves the arbiters and the intermediaries between God, and religion is such an intimate thing. And I think the more that we add the human element to it, the more that we kind of project our own structures into something that should just be about the human experience of the ultimate truth, which is God. And so unfortunately, you know, the story of human history has been largely misogynistic and patriarchal societies. And so our religious structures have reflected that reality. But I don't think it was ever meant to be the case. And that's why when we examine a lot of our scriptures, we find that it isn't designed to be that way, but the human beings involved in interpreting it and delivering it, you know, I'm trying to avoid saying the imams, right? Because then I have to take some ownership, right? They, you know, they inject their own bias and their own perspective into it, whether it's intentional or unintentional. And of course, when we look at the Quran, we see that God doesn't prescribe specific roles for men and women, right? That he doesn't tell us, you know, what our family life should look like, what our professional life should look like, you know, that women are devoid of a place within our religious institutions. But that's how traditionally many of the scholars interpreted it, because they felt that these traditional ways were closer to that kind of utopian society that they were trying to create. And so I think what we have to do, and this is the challenge, because sometimes people come in and they're like, well, we're gonna use this kind of lens, we're gonna use that kind of reading of the Quran. For me, it's very problematic. Because I think if you're trying to remove a past bias, then the most authentic way is to go back in and to reinterpret it with a fresh lens. And I think that a lot of Muslims are doing that, and they're finding that our religion is far more open and accepting and inclusive, not only on gender, but on every other thing that divides people, than we even thought or realized.
Well, I can say you sound like a Reconstructionist Jew, but I won't. I just wanted to highlight one thing. We've heard the word humility mentioned, and we've seen humility, I think, modeled. And I don't want to lose sight of this, because we live in an increasingly secular society where a lot of people associate religion with extremism and antiquated thought and say, well, why can't those religious people just give up their superstitions and join the rest of our secular world, which is so enlightened, right? I say this as a child of a member of the American Communist Party. So I know what I'm talking about there. And one of the reasons is, if we're taking this seriously, it teaches humility. And if you don't think our species needs humility, you need to watch even cable news, which I rarely recommend. Religion done right will make you feel like, who am I? Because there's such greatness, such grandeur in the ultimate. And we're hearing that from both faiths, and it's reminded at our holiest times. So again, next time you see someone who's truly arrogant, who knows everything, and who is, what is the word, mansplaining is the term that they use these days. Think about religion done right, and how humble we're all supposed to be. And Moses, something we have in common, is considered the greatest of Jews, not because he was the most learned, but because he is the most humble. which seems crazy these days because like the greatest among us are supposed to be the least humble. They're always pontificating. Moses is the most humble. So anyway, do we have one more person before we do small groups?
Hello. Ooh. I wanted to offer an Orthodox answer to the question about men and women.
Oh, yeah, that microphone sounds like it's God speaking. Now we're getting past the gender of God. I get that.
But is it God the Father?
That was close to it. Almost God. In God's image. So I wanted to offer an Orthodox perspective or answer to a question because I come from an Orthodox community. And in order to define what is the role of women and men in anything, it would probably serve the purpose to look into the origins of it. What is the purpose of men and women altogether, right? And in the beginning, God created men and women in one body. And then he separated them, giving each of them their respective roles. And so I feel like living to fulfill your potential gives you the most happiness, right? So when you do perform your role in the body that you were given, that gives you the most happiness. Men and women are not supposed to substitute each other. They're supposed to complement each other because at once they were all together in one physical body and then they were separated. And so the point of each role, each body is to continue complementing each other even when they're separated. So in this paradigm, in this realm, it's not a coincidence that women were given breasts, right? Breasts that produce milk. The role of a woman is to nurture and feed their child. You can try to milk a man, good luck, right? So the physical bodies are given in such a way that, again, men and women are supposed to fulfill their roles by reaching their potential and complementing each other. And there is plenty of room for role for women in Judaism. I mean, our foremother Sarah was pretty much driving Abraham and all his actions, and so was our foremother Rebecca, and so was Rachel and Leah. And then there were queens who were driving their kings, sometimes nuts and sometimes giving them valuable advice. I mean, we all know about the women of King Solomon, who was the wisest, and wives of King David. So I don't think that women performing actions that equal or on par with men actually helps them fulfill their potential. Women doing so, men serve God by offering prayers 3 times a day or 5 times a day. Women serve God by lighting candles on Friday night. And again, it's not diminishing either one of them. It's just they reach their potential in the way that they were designed to do.
Okay, I apologize to anyone else who had other questions, but we will have a chance. I saw a couple of hands up. Maybe you can be the speakers at the end. Because we do want to make time for small group discussions. You should all have 4 questions. If we can just come together in different pockets of the room, what do you think? Groups of 6? And then we'll try to get back at what, 10 to? So if we can occupy all of the prayer area so that, we can be as quiet as possible. Oh, all right, 1:45. We honestly, normally we do this for 45 minutes. Yeah, JIDS is different from other Washington, D.C. based groups. We're not speaker societies. We're a dialogue society. So that's why yes, because, well, she is the most humble rabbi in town. She actually does take that value seriously, in case you can't tell. I taught her at an early age what I don't like about rabbis. Anyway, so if we can move to different areas, we can rejoin at 1:45, have a half an hour. It'll be a small group discussion. How about that? Is that a good compromise? Okay, we'll have just let's have one group here, like each of the 4 corners, just organically form, no? Right over here. right over here. Can you guys meet here? I will. Just go around in a small group and control it yourself. You can take on all or any number. It's very loose. You can, but I mean, you can't, you guys are not facing each other. So move the chairs. Yeah. Okay. All right, guys, let's see if we can get this going here. Shemai, here you go. Guys, feel free to do all the questions or just some of them. It's really up to your group. 2-minute warning, everybody. 2-minute warning.
Bismillah. I'm gonna interrupt your conversations with the call to prayer for the sunset prayer, and then we'll gather together for our exchange of ideas. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. الله أكبر الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله لا إله إلا الله
So, oh, you wanted, you,
So what you just heard is a call to prayer that we do 5 times a day. As you know, there are 5 prayers, and this is for the sunset prayer. It begins by saying that God is the greatest. It's repeated 4 times. I bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship other than the one God. I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God. Come to prayer, come to your betterment and success. And then again, we repeat that I bear witness that there is no God but God. La ilaha illallah. So that means that there is no deity except for the one God. And so this is the way that we called up everyone to prayer. Because of the change in time, we kind of went a little bit longer. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask everybody to come gather. I think Dan is going to direct the conversation and we'll conclude. And while we're doing so, I'll be in building A because we'll be doing the sunset prayer. And that just takes 5 minutes and then we'll be back. Thank you. No, I normally don't. No, I normally don't. I normally lead the prayer, but I just did it so you guys would be able to hear it.
okay.
I normally
So
lead
we
the
need-
sunset
we
prayer.
need to, we need to let him
That's
go.
okay.
He'll be back in a couple of minutes. Just so, again, in terms of planning, there will be food served after this program right out down there next to us. So we'll leave the building and then go down there. Yeah, the underneath, the one that's sort of half a level down. But I was wondering if those of you who had participated in conversations, if somebody wants to share some thoughts from your small group. Lighthearted, okay.
To the beautiful call to prayer that we heard from the Imam. And I'm saying this, it's a joke that has a grain of truth, and it's out of a sign of respect. So a Jewish guy and a Muslim guy were sitting on a train across from each other, and the sun was setting as the train is moving along. And the Muslim guy noticed that it's time for the afternoon prayer. So he doesn't care that he's in a car train. He has to do his prayers. So he finds a quiet corner in the car train. He takes out the prayer rug and he does what we just heard from the Imam. And he quietly says it without disturbing anybody. Ashhadu an la ilaha Muhammad Rasulullah. And the whole car train is looking at him, giving him the looks, you know. But he doesn't care because he's proud of his religion. So the Jewish guy sees that and he sees, oh, you're right. It's time for mincha prayer. So, you know, I got to also do my prayers. But after he saw how the whole car train was looking at him, no, he's not going to do that. So he takes out his smartphone and he goes, some greater truth there about being proud of your religion.
All right, who wants to share what was being discussed for the last 30 minutes? We fight so hard to give you time for these things.
A lot about the religion of our people in our group, and we talked a lot about that. And Akbar told us quite a bit about was it Ishmael or Isaac and the relationship that he had with Abraham, which we don't really talk as much about. And he told me this nice little story about a spring called Zamzam. And this spring has the purest water that came up for Isaac so he could drink. And I thought that was neat. And then Jim told us about the Catholic tradition of confession and how you let it all out and how the priest is kind of like a psychologist. But I'm going to give the microphone to these ladies because I think you talked about the Quaker
I
tradition.
was just asking you, what happens in a Quaker meeting? And I couldn't quite remember what today was because, I mean, actually we're in silent meditation most of the time. So what did other people say? And I couldn't quite remember, but I do remember having shared a couple of weeks ago that I sort of suddenly got a message which seemed profound to me and which I shared in Quaker meeting saying, please help me see the things I do not want to see. And I just kind of left it at that. And it was pretty profound.
Thank
People over here.
So one of the questions we talked about was that fourth one about the meaning of the Abraham's sacrifice, and a couple of different themes came out. One was that at least from the Jewish perspective, that was the last time that God would demand a human sacrifice, when other cultures 4,000 years ago might have been doing that. But then also I had observed that it was kind of like the game of chicken between Abraham and God, and who's going to say no first. Apparently, Abraham won the game of chicken because God was the one who had to stop him from going forward with it.
I think most of the people here are not Muslim because they have obviously gone across the way. I hope you got an appreciation today for the extent to which the prophets in Judaism and Christianity are important in Islam. I mean, you know, the statement about Moses being mentioned more often than any other individual in the Quran. I don't know how many Jews and Christians in America understand that, but you can educate them.
The similarities between the Jews and Jewish people and the Muslims, and that you said, Dan, I think, or the Imam, that we are, you know, cousins. And I think that needs to be put out there more, that many generations ago we were family. I personally think we need some family therapy. You guys talked about it. I thought that was very sweet, or whatever on there. But I think there needs to be some serious family therapy. The one thing I had a question, Hannah, Rabbi Hannah, you didn't mention it and the Imam didn't, is the food that we eat. If there's similar foods or different foods when Muslims can eat again. I find I'm Jewish and I love the foods in my holidays, and I love to learn about other people's foods in their holidays too. So I don't know if you want to talk about some of the foods. Well, I'll just say, if people don't know Rosh Hashanah, because it's the beginning, the new year, our new year, then we wish each other a sweet new year. I mean, I don't know, is everybody Jewish here? No, I don't think so. I'm like talking. And so we eat a lot of sweet foods. Mostly we pick apples and we dip them in honey. We make honey cakes. I'm from Canada. We eat a lot of maple syrup in the fall on whatever. It's always on the table. What else do we eat?
Fish heads are a thing for some Jews. Fish heads for the head of the year. Does anyone do the fish head thing?
Heads of cabbage.
Cabbage, heads of cabbage. I like that. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a whole tradition of simanim, where you take the name of the food in Hebrew and play on words. You use that to wish that something good will happen this year and that all the bad things will be eliminated, no more trouble, famine. It's always connected to the name of the food. So, for example, there's a food, a date. Actually, that's this. So, can you come out?
Yeah, yeah.
Here, I just say that no one's talked about the Jewish feast on Yom Kippur and what people eat. It's either nothing or
Yeah. Well, I think I'm sure most of you know that kosher is like halal. And we are recommended to eat halal, but a lot of people here, they eat everything, which is also in the restaurants, and it's not halal, but I think our Imam, one of the Imam and one of the very pious leaders, they have said that if you live in a Western country, you can eat that because they don't take the name of any other prophet when they slaughter. So halal is when you take the name of La ilaha illallah, God is great, and then you slaughter. But if you're not taking any name and you're draining all the blood, the main reason for halal and kosher is you drain all the blood so that there are no diseases, and then you can cook the food. So we all eat halal except for pork. We don't eat pork. And on Eid, as you said, on the first Eid, which is the Eid al-Baqar, no, Eid al-Adha, sorry. We normally make, when the men go for prayers in the morning and they come back, so the lady of the house prepares a dessert. It's with vermicelli and milk, and you cook it, and with some cardamom and some saffron. And that is a traditional thing. It's called sheer khurma. So sheer khurma. Sheer is milk, and yeah, and khurma is dates. So some people put dates in there too. You mean, sorry, I didn't hear properly.
You cut the jugular.
Part of, oh, this is the back.
Yeah, yeah,
Stand up, stand
yeah. You just slaughter it quickly. Right. Yeah. Well, it is, you cut the jugular vein so that it's quick and the animal doesn't have to suffer pain. It is a part of the halal, yes.
Was just at another dinner that was students from Howard University and then Jewish students from like the DC metro area, and we had a photo op at the end, and it was the most chaotic photo that has been taken in my life. It was like everyone was moving, like stop, like everyone like stay still. No one was staying still. Half people left. It's like, oh my god.
People are organized.
Yeah, God willing. God
The
willing.
best
we'll
thing
see.
are the sweets that they
The
serve.
sweets, yeah.
Like I somewhere, yeah. I can.
Ladies can sit.
Oh, sounds good. Imam, do you know, is there a good place for this?
Yeah, I'll take
Okay,
care of it.
beautiful.